Hello and welcome to another Cliff Reviews Art House. This time I'm reviewing the film Heretic, directed by Scott Beck and Bryan. Two Mormons go to a big old house hoping to convert Hugh Grant. They end up getting a lot more than they bargained for. This is the basic story. The film has a really interesting premise and a really interesting discussion of different religions, their origin, how they're all iterations of an original idea. It works a little like a play. The film is very much dialogue driven for the first half, like a deep psychological play. At the level of a thriller, the film works really well. It moves slowly and it is perhaps a little contrived at times, but we care about these two women and there is a level of awkwardness right from the start that just builds and builds. Even when we know that he has dishonest motives, there's still great mystery and uncertainty, and the gradual reveal of the story is really effective. The actors are all excellent. The two women play it perfectly, and Hugh Grant is refreshingly different than many of his other roles. There was one thing that bothered me about Hugh Grant's performance. If you're British and of a certain age, you'll remember a comedian called Ronnie Corbett. I kept finding myself thinking of him in Hugh Grant's delivery. Not an important point, but I did find that a bit of a distraction. Until halfway through the film, I was really enjoying it. It had me gripped by the story, and intellectually, philosophically, I was fascinated. From the halfway point, though, I found that the film became increasingly less interesting. It turned into more of a pure horror film, and it lost its way in terms of the fascinating philosophical religious questions that it was exploring in the first half. I found this a big disappointment. Based on the first half, I had the feeling that the film was potentially going to be extraordinary. By the end, the film turned into a pretty standard horror thriller, with some of the storyline just a little bit silly, I thought. I'm not religious as such, but I am deeply spiritual, and I'm really interested in exactly the kind of philosophical discussions that the film explored. So this fading into a perfectly respectable but fairly standard thriller was really disappointing for me. I guess that if the intellectual discussion is less interesting to the viewer, it is possible that someone would enjoy the horror elements in the second half more than me. That said, I think that if you fall into this category, the first half of the film would have been a bit disappointing in its kind of wordy intellectual depth before anything really starts happening. I think that this is a major flaw in the film. For me, it didn't have the courage of its convictions to follow through the intellectual elements of the film with an ending that really lived up to it. There is some ambiguity at the end, but I don't think that this corrects the flaw. In fact, it felt to me contrived, like the filmmakers thought it would be cool just to add a bit of ambiguity in at the end. For me, I felt pretty dissatisfied at the end of the film. I didn't know who directed and wrote this film prior to seeing it, but I've learned afterwards that the writer-directors were writers on the first Quiet Place film. Now, I really don't like the Quiet Place films. I did a video on this a little while back. I know I'm in a minority on this one, but I really didn't like the first Quiet Place. And then the sequels were a disappointment too. So it kind of makes me really wonder about their work. So, I do think that Heretic has major flaws. However, my instinct is still to recommend this film. It's entertaining, it's intriguing, and it did keep me interested right to the end. Great acting performances. For me, it's just deeply flawed because it pulled back from giving us something that really lived up to the fantastic first half of the film. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.